Showtime.
To adventure, a view of the world. From high up above, I can see the earth below. Directions to guide us and symbols to show. A map is a picture that tells us where to go. Maps hold the key to finding a location. Maps hold the key. People, places, nations, and with a map you can find almost anything. With a map you can find almost anything.
How location affects life.
No, I'm not confused. I'm just traveling. The parka is for Alaska, and the swimsuit is for Australia. And those are just a few of the places I'm going to. I've marked most of my itinerary on the map.
Maps and globes are tools that we use to look at the world. A map is a flat picture of the world, or one part of the world. A globe is a model of the Earth. It is round like the Earth and shows the continents and oceans. Maps and globes both use symbols to make them easier to read. A symbol stands for or represents something else. On this map, a triangle stands for mountain. Anywhere you see a triangle, you know that there is a mountain. Most maps and globes have a legend that tells you what each symbol means. Many maps and globes also have special lines that make them easier to read. These lines are called latitude and longitude lines. Latitude and longitude lines are imaginary lines that circle the Earth. Latitude lines run parallel to each other, east and west, making circles around the Earth. Longitude lines run north and south, sort of like the sections of a peeled orange. You can describe any point on Earth by its latitude and longitude. Latitude and longitude lines are measured in numbers called degrees. Houston, Texas is located at about 30 degrees north longitude and 95 degrees west latitude. If you want to tell someone where Houston was and they didn't want to look all over the globe to find it, an easy way to direct them to the city is by giving its latitude and longitude. Because the world is so large, geographers often separate the globe into regions. A region is an area in the world that shares similar characteristics, like climate or politics.
These characteristics and others affect the lives of the people who live there. People all over the world live differently because of human characteristics, like population, politics, and time zones.
And because of physical features, like landforms, plate tectonics, and climate.
Climate.
A region's weather or climate can really affect how people live. Some places in the world are known for their extremely cold climates, like northern Canada, Greenland, Alaska, and Antarctica, while other regions of the world are known for their extremely hot climates, like northern Africa and Central America.
Some regions of the world have a lot of precipitation, rain, or snow, like the rainforests of Asia. Or very little precipitation, like the deserts of Australia.
Your location on Earth helps determine your climate. If you live near the equator, you probably live in a very warm climate. The equator is the imaginary line that lies in the middle of the tropical zone. The equator divides the Earth into two halves, or hemispheres. Places near the equator are warmer because the sun shines directly over the equator more than anywhere else in the Earth. Surrounding the equator is an area called the tropical zone. The tropical zone is like a belt around the Earth that begins at a latitude line called the Tropic of Cancer and ends at the latitude line called the Tropic of Capricorn. In the tropics, the sun shines almost directly overhead all year long, making this entire area warm in the summer and in the winter. Because of the warm climate, people here dress in summer clothing, have houses that let air flow through easily, and find activities that help them stay cool year-round. The further north or south you move from the tropical zone, the more varied the climate becomes. To the north of the equator is the northern hemisphere, and south of the equator is the southern hemisphere. Places north and south of the tropical zone usually have 4 distinct seasons: summer, autumn, winter, and spring. The weather changes from warm to cool and back again. The further north or south you travel, the colder the winters get. At the poles, north and south, it is cold year-round. People in the colder parts of the world adapt to the changing climates by wearing different kinds of clothes in each season, living in houses with heating or air conditioning, and finding activities to enjoy both in the summer and in the winter.
But climate isn't the only physical characteristic that affects the way people live. Another physical characteristic is plate tectonics.
Plate tectonics.
The Earth's crust is made up of many pieces that are constantly moving and shifting. The pieces are called tectonic plates. They fit together around the Earth like a jigsaw puzzle. When tectonic plates bump into or scrape against each other, they can cause earthquakes and volcanoes. The country Japan is located right on top of many tectonic plates. Every so often, these plates move, causing major earthquakes. Because of this, houses and other buildings are carefully designed and constructed to withstand earthquakes and remain standing.
Landforms.
Landforms like mountains, valleys, and deserts also affect how people live. Mountain passes can be a difficult place to live because of narrow roads, heavy snowfall, and the distance from major cities. But the people who choose to make their homes in the mountains have learned to adapt to a different lifestyle. Most families have stored supplies of food and water in case of an emergency. Their homes have fireplaces and heating systems. And of course, now people have telephones and other methods of communicating, even in the most difficult situations. Life in the mountains can be beautiful, but it can also be challenging. Another place that can be both challenging and beautiful is the desert. The desert is a dry place to live, and many deserts in the United States are very hot most of the year. People have made the deserts of the southwestern United States home for thousands of years. Native Americans like the Zuni and Hopi used the desert resources to make their homes, grow food, and create beautiful works of art. The lack of water in desert areas is a challenge to people who live there. But with irrigation and canal systems, people have been able to make their homes in some of the driest climates in our country. The beauty of the desert draws people in, and they adapt their lifestyles to be there. People who live in desert areas conserve water and use plants from the desert instead of grass for lawns. They dress for the hot weather and live in houses that have air conditioning. Many people do most of their outside work in the morning when it's cooler and stay indoors during the hot afternoons.
But climate and other physical factors aren't the only things that affect how people live. Places can also be described by their human characteristics, like time zones.
Time zones.
People decided to divide the Earth into 24 time zones. The time zone boundaries run north and south like lines of longitude. Within each time zone, the time is the same. In the Eastern Standard Time Zone, when it is 12 o'clock noon, 3 time zones to the west, in the Pacific Standard Time Zone, it is 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you live in the Eastern Standard Time Zone and your grandma lives in the Pacific Standard Time Zone, you probably shouldn't call her before you go to school, or you might be waking her up at 4 in the morning.
Government.
A location is also affected by human characteristics, like government, how their leaders lead and make the laws and rules for everyone to live by. People in some parts of the world practice a form of government called democracy, like in the United States, Western Europe, and most of the independent countries of the world. In a democracy, individuals own property and can vote for laws or to elect representatives. Decisions are made by a majority vote. Other countries, such as North Korea and Cuba, practice a type of government called communism. In a communist country, all work and property is shared by the whole community, but decisions are made by a small group of leaders.
Population.
Some parts of the world have very few people, like the entire continent of Antarctica.
While others are home to many people, like China. In big cities, people have learned to live in less space. This affects everything: business, transportation, even how you build. Homes on the crowded coastlines look very different than homes in the interior states.
Population growth.
Throughout the world, many people choose to settle or live in places near water. That was one way that the early settlers in the United States made their lives less challenging.
Living near fresh water, like lakes or rivers, means having water to drink, a place to find food, and even a way of getting from one place to another. In the Northwest United States, the Chinook people, a Native American group, chose to live next to the Columbia River and near the Pacific Ocean. The ocean and river provided food like salmon, water to drink, and a way to travel to other Native American people to trade with them. When people from England first came to what is now the United States, they chose to settle on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, near a freshwater source, the James River, and Jamestown, Virginia was born. The ocean made it easier to transport goods and people to and from England, and the river provided water and some food for the settlers. As European Americans started to explore the United States, they discovered many places to make their homes. Many people settled in the areas surrounding the Great Lakes: Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Superior.
They made their homes there. And that's a good way to remember the names of those lakes.
The lakes are connected to each other by smaller bodies of water. They connected to the Atlantic Ocean first by the St. Lawrence River, and now by a man-made system of canals called the St. Lawrence Seaway. Access to the ocean from interior states made it possible to trade with other communities, so cities and many industries have grown around the Great Lakes. Chicago, Illinois, at the intersection of Lake Michigan and the Illinois Waterway, has grown to be a center for world trade because of its location. Rivers and other waterways are often the site of growth in a region. They provide an easy way to transport goods, water for drinking and crops, as well as a source of food. The banks of the Mississippi River have seen this kind of development since people first came to America. Native American tribes, and later explorers from Europe, made their homes next to the Mississippi River for fishing, farming, and trading. By the late 1700s, the port city of New Orleans was established at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Since then, other cities have grown up on both sides of the river. The river itself has become a major trade route for barges carrying goods from the landlocked middle of the United States to the Gulf of Mexico.
Water isn't the only geographical feature that affects growth.
Mountains, deserts, and valleys also affect how populations grow. Valleys are areas of low land surrounded by higher ground. Often, valleys have a river or many rivers flowing through them. Because they are protected by higher land, a valley often has a milder climate than the surrounding areas. And because water drains from the higher land to lower land, valleys are often covered in rich soil. That is great for farming. The Central Valley of California is one such valley, full of rivers and rich soil. From Native American times to today, people have cultivated the fertile soil and enjoyed the mild climate of this area. Today, millions of people live in the Central Valley. It is known as the greatest garden in the world and provides 1/4 of all the food eaten in the United States. Living in a mountainous location is very different than life in the valley. Some mountainous areas contain underground resources, such as coal. Mining these resources created jobs, and these areas have grown. Other mountainous areas attract growth by their natural beauty and the recreation opportunities they offer.
These factors not only draw people to live there, they also limit the sizes of these communities. This is going to take a minute.
Some people find that the climate is too difficult for them. The altitude may be too high or the winters too cold. There is less flat land for homes and roadways. There can be fewer businesses, and that means fewer jobs for people. Some mountainous areas need to be protected from the effects of pollution that a large population of people would produce. These areas limit the number of new homes or new residents to preserve the mountain beauty for future people to see. While desert communities look very different, the reason for their growth can be similar to mountain communities. Like in the mountains, people move to a desert environment because of its unique beauty and climate. And while some people might find the climate too hot or dry, many stay and adapt to the hot weather. These adaptations put a big strain on a desert's limited resources of water and power. And while there are a few large desert cities like Las Vegas, Nevada, and Phoenix, Arizona, most desert areas have limited growth because of the lack of environmental resources. Life in the desert can be challenging and creative as people look for new ways to provide enough power to cool their homes and businesses.
Sometimes, both the location and human factors affect the growth of a city. Not again.
Austin, Texas is located on the banks of the Colorado River. Soon after the first European settlers moved to what would be the site of Austin, the small town was named as the capital of the new Republic of Texas. Many government officials moved to Austin and the city grew. In the late 1800s, the railroad came through Austin, and a dam was built on the Colorado River with a power plant. The new industries and businesses that sprang up because of these events brought more and more people to the area. Later, military bases were built near the city. Today, Austin is still growing. And it all began as a little spot on the Colorado River because water was available there. Another river city, Sacramento, California, is in some ways very similar to Austin. Like Austin, Sacramento started on the banks of a river. It became the capital of its state, California, and home to many universities, businesses, and military bases. However, unlike Austin, it is very close to a major mountain range, the Sierra Nevadas, and within a fairly short drive to high mountain communities such as South Lake Tahoe. Although these two areas look close on a map, because of the characteristics of their locations, They are worlds apart in how people live. Sacramento is in the middle of a very large valley. It has very hot, dry summers and cold winters, while South Lake Tahoe is very high in elevation. It has moderate summer weather and cold winters with a lot of snow. In Sacramento, many people travel major freeways to a variety of suburbs, while in South Lake Tahoe, the mountains allow for only small roads and less populated neighborhoods.
Even the biggest cities in the world started as small towns, or just dots on the map.
The resources, geographical features, and climate of an area help determine how quickly it will grow and how large it will become. The location of a place affects how and why people will live there, and what they need to adapt to their location.
Because location affects life.
All set?
Yep.
What have you got in here?
I have a lot of things I need to bring. Let's see, I have a parka and a swimsuit and some cowboy boots, a cowboy hat, and a saddle.